Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Thank you for joining this GP Strategies webinar, where we'll explore best practices and innovative insights to help you and your organization improve performance.
Introduce you to today's presenter, Leah Clark. Leah Clark is the Senior Director of Leadership at GP Strategies. She works closely with our clients to help understand their leadership and engagement challenges and consults with them on creative solutions. Leah has a Master of Arts degree in Organizational Psychology from Columbia University and a Bachelor of Arts in English and Sociology from Boston College. We have a great presentation discussion planned for today. So I am going to pass the baton over to Leah and let her take it from here.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kim. Go ahead and share my screen here. And Kim, if you wouldn't mind keeping an eye on the chat for me, that would be fantastic. I'm going to see if I can, keep an eye on it as well, but would love for you to let me know, particularly at the end, if there are questions coming up that we can answer. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're joining from. I'm really pleased to be here chatting with you today about hybrid leadership and some best practices around leading a team in a hybrid environment. I think this is such a timely topic, and based on the number of folks that registered for this webinar and those of you who are on the call, it seems as though it certainly is a hot topic that we're all really vested in cracking the code on, figuring out how as leaders and as teammates we can be productive and care for each other in a hybrid environment. Because hybrid is different. You know, we've all certainly experienced a virtual environment for the past couple of years, and there's a virtual component to hybrid. But hybrid, as we're going to be talking about, is not 2020 and 2021's virtual. It's something decidedly different. And so we'll talk today about the challenges and benefits of a hybrid team, the 4 critical elements of a high-performing team in any environment. So there's a little bit of a spoiler alert there in the agenda, which is to say that those elements of what's important for a team to perform well, it's not decidedly different in a hybrid environment. Similar skill sets of a leader, similar needs for teams, there's just a different context. And so we'll talk about what that context is and the nuances of leading differently. We'll talk about some of the challenges and then really dig into the mindset shift and the skill set sharpening that leaders need to foster teamwork and community in hybrid teams. So a lot of debate right now, right? Who has it better? Are you in a better scenario if you're going in the office where you can dress up and see your colleagues every day? Or do you prefer to work from home in your pajamas? Is that a better scenario? You know, who misses the catered lunch or the cafeteria lunch versus the not so glamorous bowl of cereal that many of us, myself included, have had standing over our kitchen counter as we've worked from home? Or what about the debate about, commuting? So many of us really prefer to not have that in-car commute. It adds time to our day. We'd much rather be home either to pursue a hobby or be with family members at the end of the day. But others say, you know what, I really liked that commute. It gave me the opportunity to clear my mind, and I appreciated the time that I had to myself. Other folks will say, oh gosh, I get distracted in the office and I work much better in my home environment. But others might argue, just the opposite. I've got too much going on at home, perhaps small children or other distractions. When I'm in the office, I really focus a lot better. And then certainly a lot of debate and conversation around connection and isolation. And are we more isolated in a virtual scenario or as a virtual employee? Or, and do we need in office to stay connected? I think it's a fair question to be asking. But here's the bottom line. So much really depends on personal styles, people's needs, and the role of work in each person's life. So there's really not one employee or the other who necessarily has it better. And so, it's really important that you understand what is really critical for each individual on your team as they think about their own personal hybrid scenario or their remote reality. but I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Let's backtrack a little bit and define what we mean by hybrid. Well, a couple of years ago, this was, at least for me, anytime I used hybrid in the conversation, it was in relationship to a hybrid vehicle. Or maybe it was the mashup of a fruit. I'm not sure this one exists in nature. In fact, I know it doesn't, this combination of a kiwi or orange. Or maybe hybrid was your dog, a cross between a golden retriever and a poodle. This is my hybrid dog. And this is what hybrid meant in different ways for us. But this term hybrid now is something that really is manifesting itself in so many different ways as we talk about the work environment. And that's the definition of hybrid that I want to settle on here as we move through the rest of this discussion. So for purposes of today, we're really talking about hybrid as defined by, quite simply, a portion of the company that commutes to an office and a portion that works remotely. And sometimes folks in a hybrid environment will do both, in the office some of the time and remote for a portion of their schedule. And why is this relevant now, right? Many employees have always worked remotely, myself included. So why is there so much conversation about this? Well, I think it's a couple of different reasons. First of all, the scale at which a remote and a virtual environment is happening is beyond what we've seen in the past. What used to be maybe an accommodation for 1 or 2 employees now is happening in more significant proportions. So the scale is different. For many organizations, it's a strategic company decision. They are making an active choice to be virtual first or digital first versus an accommodation for 1 employee or a handful of employees. And as a result, I think there's greater attention being paid to the implications for the individual and implications for the organization when it happens at scale. For the individual, what is their remote reality? How can they be productive at home? What do they need? That was something that folks needed to figure out for themselves, I think, in the past. And now the organization is asking questions. Leaders are asking questions of their people. What do you need? And for that organization, gosh, all of these issues that are popping up now that it's a more scalable conversation. How do you onboard an employee in a hybrid environment? What does compensation look like when you have hybrid teams and some are in areas that have a higher cost of living and others are choosing to live in a remote environment? And then I think that overall, this is shifting to more of a shared responsibility. And so I think it's relevant for all of these reasons. And again, hybrid is 2021's virtual. That virtual scenario that we had throughout 2020 and continues today, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something different, and it's not for everyone. And it's not possible with all employees. I want to recognize that some industries, some jobs, they simply can't have a hybrid scenario. And so this conversation is relevant to a population of the larger work world. My PowerPoint here. But it's worth spending some time to discuss and to figure out, because there are benefits. And what's really fascinating is so many employees are really pushing organizations to engage in this conversation. That copy that you see on the right-hand side, this is a letter that employees from Apple wrote to their executives, really advocating for a location flexible work environment. And the employees are extolling the virtues of this type of scenario, talking about the diversity and inclusion and retention and hiring, saying that they've actually torn down communication barriers, better work-life balance, integration of remote and flexible employees, and certainly the safety issues associated with a hybrid environment. So there certainly are benefits. Sourcing talent from anywhere. Again, that greater flexibility, less expensive for some companies who have actually reduced their physical footprint, and benefits to the environment, right? When not as many people are commuting. But at the same time, you know what? We're also hearing from employees, I want to be in this hybrid environment, but I miss my colleagues. I miss seeing them in person. And I'm overwhelmed by this digital fatigue. But I like the balance that hybrid offers me. So which is it? What exactly are they asking for? Are they asking for virtual? Are they asking for in person? Well, really, the answer is yes. Employees, I think, are asking for the best of both worlds. And whether you see that request coming up in data or research or in consumer habits, buying habits, Instagram and Stitch Fix, the message is being sent in so many different ways. I think Microsoft did a great job in their work trend index report. And some of the data you see on the right-hand side is where they've shown the evolving employee expectations. Expectations, 80% of managers say they expect more flexible work from home policies. 73% want flexible remote work options to stay. 67% want more in-person collaboration. And you can see again on the left-hand side, well, what do they want? Do they want to wear their suit or something similar to it and show up in person? Or do they want to continue to have that athleisure wear type of experience? Well, again, regardless of whether it's hard data or consumer buying habits, employees are saying they want both. They want the best of both worlds. What I think they're really asking for is flexibility. Flexibility is really at the root of this request. And organizations, probably many of those represented by the folks on the phone, are scrambling to figure this out quickly. And it's a bit all over the road. So you have folks like Morgan Stanley saying, we do our work inside Morgan Stanley offices. Or JP Morgan saying, well, if you can go to dinner in New York, you can come into the office. So taking a fairly hard line here, and we'll see if that winds up working out for them, or if perhaps it's an attitude that's, relegated to dinosaurs or the Stone Age. We'll see. I think a lot of debate and conversation playing out around this. Or you've got Pepsi, who for some time has certainly crafted an environment around, I think they call it work that works, where they say, look, we've proven it's doable. We're not going to put any stipulations in place around number of days. We may sometimes make a comment about opportunities for collaboration or connection when we think, folks should be together, but by and large, they're following a work that works philosophy. And then poor Apple and Uber coming out with policy and then needing to retreat from that. And some of that certainly is because of issues associated with variance and safety. But also, again, I think it's because employees are speaking up and they have quite a voice in this conversation around hybrid and what it is that they want and expect from their organizations. And make no mistake about it, there are challenges, real or perceived. A lot of discussion around culture. Our culture is going to start to be undermined if we don't get back together soon. Other folks saying culture is defined by more than our physical footprint, and we can continue to have a strong corporate culture, even if that culture is hybrid. Productivity. This is an interesting one because many organizations have said that they have been productive. Their folks have contributed and got it done in a virtual environment. In fact, Mercer released some information that said 90% of employers that they surveyed said that productivity is the same or better than it was pre-pandemic. Nevertheless, there are still questions about the long-term viability of productivity. Meeting effectiveness, right? Meetings are the lifeblood of so much of our organizations. Can they continue to be effective in a hybrid environment? I was talking to a leader, a couple of weeks ago, and she had tried her first hybrid meeting. She said it didn't go well. There were folks in the office and folks on the phone, and they couldn't get the cables to work, and their hybrid person ultimately was on a laptop that they had to kind of prop up at the front of the table. And she said it was frustrating and not exactly ideal. So figuring out meeting effectiveness and can we long-term hold effective meetings is a great question to ask. I'll talk a little bit about some tips there as we go further in. Team cohesion. Again, similar to culture, will the team gel, particularly if somebody is onboarded or hired in a hybrid environment and they never got the chance to meet folks in person? Can that team be cohesive? Can we collaborate? Gosh, a lot of debate about this one too. This is great, hybrid is fine, but when it comes to collaboration, in person is the only way. Well, is it? Maybe for some and maybe not for all, but figuring out how to collaborate in a hybrid environment and whether or not it can work for your organization. Digital fatigue, right? A lot of people, I'm zoomed out, there's this blurring of work life, and I'm fatigued. I think these last two in the bottom right will become particularly pronounced in the coming months as we turn to, I would say, sort of higher order individual contributor needs, a renewed focus on career development. What does that look like in a hybrid environment? Are there challenges with the idea of out of sight, out of mind? And can we make sure that we are looking at the contributions and the career of folks in the office in the same way we are a hybrid employee? And then last but not least, equitable treatment, and a lot of concern about proximity bias, making sure that folks are feeling as though they're in a safe environment and equally valued regardless of where they sit. Now, here's the key. It's not that organizations are saying these are challenges and employees are saying, no, we don't think this is a problem or a potential challenge at all. Employees are saying, yeah, some of these are challenges, and we don't want to throw in the towel. We don't want you, leader, an organization, to say, these are challenges, let's give up and go back to the way it was. What we're saying is, we want to figure this out and we want you to help us. So working together to find ways to tackle some of the challenges and to work through these issues is really the name of the game. And I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about the role of the leader, but I want to make sure that you know that the individual employee also has skin in the game. They have a vested interest in figuring out how they can show up in a hybrid environment. So my focus for today is on the role of the leader, but I don't want to leave you with the feeling that this all rests on the leaders. It certainly is an agreement, a conversation that needs to happen, and the employee has responsibility in helping to deal with all of these challenges as much as the leader does. So I did say it in case we get to the end and the leaders are feeling quite encumbered by what they need to do. It's a shared responsibility. But so let's talk about this. How do you need to lead differently? What's important to focus on? Gosh, there's so much coming at us in this hybrid environment. As a leader, where do I look first? What do I need to focus on? Well, there are some things that don't change, regardless of whether or not you are in person, hybrid, or virtual. And I want to share with you what we feel is really a cornerstone to good leadership. And these are things that don't change. What doesn't change is the leaders need to focus on contribution and satisfaction. As a leader, you need, regardless of where your employees sit, to make sure that they understand what is expected of them. How can they best contribute to the goals of the organization? What you also need to focus on, though, is the satisfaction of your employees. And that's where I'm going to probably spend a little bit more time. I will spend more time in this discussion, is focusing on the satisfaction side of things. Because I think that folks have generally agreed that we can get things done in a virtual and by extension hybrid environment. We've been productive, right? We can contribute and be successful. Where I think we need to spend some time is on the satisfaction side, because what we're hearing is, yes, we've gotten it done, but at what cost, right? What cost? Because my people are fatigued. And so I think focusing on that left-hand side especially is where leaders need to redouble their efforts. So this hasn't changed. Leaders have always needed to focus on contribution and satisfaction. What I think is maybe a little bit different is a redoubling of efforts on the satisfaction side of the equation. And that means understanding what's important to your employees. What are their values? What motivates them? Maybe that's shifted as a result of what we've been through in the past 2 years, or as a result of their work from home scenario. You need to demonstrate as a leader that you're vested in their personal satisfaction and engage in a dialogue around what's important to them. Personal wellness. such an important topic right now and a critical motivator to keep your people engaged. Have the conversation with your people about their fatigue level and how they're doing in terms of personal wellness and satisfying that core value. I'll talk about this here. I'll talk about it again. Make sure that you're talking to them about career development, regardless of location. Show that you are vested in them and who they are, regardless of whether or not they were in the office sitting next to you or sitting at home. Make sure that you don't lose that focus on career development. And then last but not least, don't take a one-size-fits-all approach. That means you're going to have to engage with each of your employees and talk about these issues in a one-on-one scenario. So what hasn't changed is contribution and satisfaction. Leaders have always needed to focus on these two elements, and hybrid leaders are no different. All right.
Hey, Leah?
Yeah.
Leah, do you want to take a second? There's a couple questions that came through.
Sure, absolutely. Would love to, Kim.
Okay, so this one, it came in with they're talking about career development, and basically, is it there's a need for physical observation of employees and the way they handle situations. It is more related to what is produced visually and can be very limiting.
Yeah, so I think that that's a fair question, and again, not all roles will fit in a hybrid scenario, so I don't know the details of that. But what I would say is I would advocate more for a focus on results. So it's less about the time or the observation or the surveillance, and I know that that's a bit of a harsh word, and I would advocate more for a focus on results. And then the bottom line is there may be some things that you can't observe in a hybrid environment. And so when you need to have those in-office moments, whether it's because you need to observe a presentation or whatever it is you might be referring to, be really clear on that. So I would say, first and foremost, make sure that you're focusing on results over effort or time. And then if you say, well, that doesn't work, Leah, because I really need to see this particular thing in person, just make sure you're clear with your employee about when those in-person moments are. Don't hint or hope that they get it. Be clear when those opportunities present themselves.
Okay, let's just do one more and
Sure.
then we can move on, okay? So this question is, my fear is that there's going to be several leaders that will point an apparent drop in productivity and creativity in the last 18 months.
So is the question a fear about reduced productivity?
Are there pre-pandemic data sources to show the effectiveness of hybrid work to get buy-in from those leaders? That is the question.
Yeah, so there is a lot of data, GP strategies research, and a lot that's been published that actually proves out that folks have continued to remain as productive, if not more, in a hybrid environment. So whether you source, I think Microsoft had some good data, Mercer did as well. We've published reports that have certainly maintained that contribution or productivity has not suffered in a virtual environment. Again, I think the question that folks are saying is, but at what cost? What
Right.
cost to my employees, which is why I think continuing to advocate for also being mindful of the satisfaction side of the equation is particularly relevant. But Kim, I'm not sure I got the question right, so hopefully.
Well, hopefully the person who did ask it will verify that. But
Yeah.
also just this one real quick, how can you satisfy everyone's needs when you do need to have people in the office?
Yeah, well, I think the goal of satisfying everyone's needs is probably unrealistic. I think rather than tackle everyone's needs, I think you need to have one-on-one conversations and understand what that employee's reality is and what's important to them. So, and I think this is tough for leaders because organizations are going to certainly provide their policy, right? And they're going to hand that policy down to you as leaders. But you're where the rubber meets the road, right? You're the one who understands your employee's reality or needs to understand their reality. So I think you're going to have to, as leaders, gauge what part of that policy is negotiable and able for me to modify at the local level for me as a leader, and what is hard and fast. So I don't know that you'll satisfy what everybody needs. And I do think engaging in individual conversations to understand what is important to every person on your team is conversation that you need to be engaged in. And I also know that I see somebody else, Andrea, put in managing by outcomes. And I think that was what I was also saying. Yes, Andrea, absolutely. By results, right? That question of, but I can't observe them. So outcomes or results, I think, is increasingly where we're asking leaders to focus, less so on FaceTime.
Thanks, Leah.
All right, so let me keep an eye on my time here because I have a lot that I want to share, and appreciate the comments and the questions in the chat. If we don't get to them all on the call, sometimes we do a follow-up, so that's also an option as well. Okay, so let's get to mindsets and skill sets. What I want to suggest, and I've hinted at this a couple of times, is that leaders need a new mindset, or they need to shift their mindset. And they need the same skill sets in a new context. So I'm going to say that again, the same skill sets in a new context, because my worry is that a lot of this can be overwhelming as a leader. And again, you might be sitting there saying, gosh, there are so many new things I need to remember and new skills. It's not new skills. It's the same skills that you already probably have as a leader applied in a different context, which means there are nuances to the way you apply those skills and other things to think about. So let's dig into what I mean by mindsets and skill sets. So you need to think differently. And quite simply, digital first and virtual first is the name of the game if you have a hybrid team. So as you start to plan a meeting or an event or the onboarding of an employee or a project or a collaborative effort, rather than planning about that event that's happening in the office, start with the assumption that folks will be participating in that effort in a digital or virtual first environment. And we'll talk about some ways that you can structure your environment for a hybrid team interaction. But the first thing as a leader is to shift your mindset to a digital first or virtual first mindset. And then I think you need to consider other sort of attitudinal shifts as a leader. And I'll bring in a little bit of GP research around 4 mindsets that we have found are particularly key to leadership success and how these apply in a hybrid environment. So how can you use an agile mindset as a hybrid leader? First and foremost, well, this one almost bears no explanation because a lot of us have done this as leaders, shifted to a virtual environment very, very quickly. And then, maybe started to shift again to in-person only to have to pivot when, variants have emerged or the policy hasn't quite worked, as we saw with poor Apple and Uber. So being able to shift and be agile, having that agile mindset as a hybrid leader will be key. Continuing to have an inclusive mindset. How do I drive an environment where all folks feel a sense of belonging and safety, regardless of whether they're next to me or next to me on the screen? We believe that having an enterprise mindset, remember that contribution side of things, how can I continue to make sure that my people are keeping the goals of not just themselves or me or our team, but thinking broadly about how whatever they're going to work on or how they're going to show up benefits the client or the end consumer. So keeping that enterprise or broader mindset in mind. And then last but not least, this one will appear again as well as having a growth mindset, because it's not going to be smooth sailing, most likely right from the start, especially if you're transitioning to a hybrid environment. So having that growth mindset and knowing that it's going to be bumpy, you may not get things right from the start, but that you're in this together with your employees to shape a hybrid environment that can work for them. And then last but not least, I think this is going to be a tricky one for leaders. And I'm going to tell you right now that I don't have a silver bullet for this one, because this is going to be one that as a leader will require your own reflection. Be prepared for the why. I think employees are going to challenge and say, why? Why is this the policy? Why does it have to be 3 days? Why does it have to be 2 days? Why do I have to go back in the office when I've gotten it done for the past year and a half, 2 years? So I think as a leader, really reflecting on how you're going to be prepared to authentically answer that question is something that bears some time reflecting on. Okay, so let's go into the elements of a high performing team. And again, as I said at the very beginning, bit of a spoiler alert here, because these 4 elements of a high performing team, they're not something that we came up with for purposes of hybrid, because we believe that these are 4 critical elements of a high performing team, regardless of where that team resides. But what I want to share is some of the nuances of how to build trust, seek alignment, create connection, and drive results in a hybrid environment. So let's dig in. And we'll start with building trust. So building trust is certainly all about making sure that your people feel as though they can comfortably show up as a part of your team, as a part of your organization, and bring their true selves to the job that they do every day, that they can contribute in a way that is authentic, and that they will be supported by their team members. That they work with team members who care about them. All of these elements feed into the aspect of trust that good teams have. And so what's different about trust in a hybrid environment, and what can you do as a leader to build trust in a hybrid environment? For each of these, I'm going to share 5 tips, and there's more that you can do, but certainly I didn't want to overwhelm you. So let's focus on 5 things that you can do as a hybrid leader to build trust. Well, first of all, I think that it's important to give people the space to share their lived experience. Why is it that a hybrid scenario works for them? Perhaps they have an elderly parent who's home with them, and they want to make sure that parent has medication that they take every few hours. Maybe they have a new puppy that they're getting trained, and so being home is really important to them. Maybe they have a teenager who's going to be going to high school, and they want to be home present in the household when that person comes home. Give people the opportunity to share their lived experience. I think this is going to be an interesting one for leaders to navigate. I think we've gotten better at it this past year as more and more leaders have sort of entered into their employees' homes, right, through virtual experiences. And we've all shared a little bit more, the spouses and partners that are living with us, the children that are being homeschooled, and the furry pets. And so I think continuing to navigate this sharing of your own lived experience is an important way to build trust. And as an employee, whoops, got ahead of myself, or as a leader, share yours as well. Be willing to be disclosive and go first. Sharing and again, being a little bit more authentic and revealing more about who you are as a person and as a leader is a great way to build trust. So give people the opportunity to share their lived experience, and as a leader, share yours. How else can you build trust in a remote or hybrid environment? First of all, make sure your teams feel free to contribute. Create an environment where you are hypersensitive and tuned into who the loudest voice is in the room, and make sure that it's not just the loudest voice in the physical room, but also in the virtual room. And how can you gently and appropriately call out team members who are maybe a little bit quieter by virtue of the fact that they are in a virtual aspect of the meeting or participating in a virtual way, by showing that you value their contributions as much as you value the contributions of the individuals who are physically with you. You will continue to build trust with your employees. I've said this before, you'll hear it a couple of times, make career development a priority for all employees. Make sure that you're spending time understanding what motivates your people, how they can do work that satisfies their values, and how they can continue to develop. Now, this doesn't need to be a formal sit-down event. In fact, we've done research that shows employees want to talk about career frequently and on an informal basis. So that sounds great. You're probably sitting there saying, okay, well, how do I do that? Can you make this a little more practical? So practically speaking, bring some questions into your one-on-one. Things like, What was the best part of your week? What is a skill that you haven't tried that you'd like to? It doesn't have to be super formal to have aspects of career development in your conversation with your employees. So continue to make that a priority for all employees. Don't view the folks who are in the office as the hustlers, as some executives have said. View all of your employees as hustlers and wanting to contribute and wanting you to express a sense of being vested in their career development. Okay, ensure equitable communication. There's no quicker way to destroy trust than having there be a lack of transparency or consistency in communication. So make sure the folks in the office are hearing and receiving messages at the same pace and with the same level of transparency as those in the office. So ensure equitable communication. And then last but not least, demonstrate empathy. Be aware as a leader of how you are showing up. How are you coming across to others? Be mindful of eye contact, and when you have a video on, again, be tuned in, be aware of the way that you are coming across to others, and demonstrate a sense of empathy for what their lived experience is. So continue to demonstrate empathy. Okay, seek alignment. How can hybrid team members or hybrid leaders do that? Seeking alignment is something, again, you want to do with your team regardless of location. It's really all about making sure that you're clear on the goals. What is it that you want your teams to pursue? What are the expectations that you have of them? And how can you hold each other accountable, give feedback? All of that is key to having an aligned team. So how can you seek alignment? First of all, I mentioned this once before. Be clear about what you expect of your employees, hybrid, virtual, in office. And that includes, to the point that I made with one of the responses, be really clear about in-office moments. If you have feedback or expectations about opportunities where somebody should be in the office, to the extent that it is, of course, safe and geographically feasible, be clear about that. Don't hint or hope that they get it. I was talking to a leader who was frustrated because they were having some in-office time, and there was a large client meeting that she was going to be in the office for, even though the client was going to be virtual. She expected that her team would be in the office with her, but she didn't state that. So when they showed up on virtual, as they have for years, there was a sense of frustration. Don't hint or hope. If she wanted them in the office, there should have been probably a communication about that. And so being really clear in those in-office moments are critical. Align to goals more regularly. That might mean getting creative, like check-ins that happen while you're driving and your remote person is home. You're driving in the office, you touch base with them that way. Or maybe you send a text message in the morning just to check in with your hybrid employee. Maybe you have office hours as a leader once a week where your team can show up. They know that that's open space where they can find you to talk to you, to make sure that you are aligned to what is expected of them. So find ways to continue to seek alignment, give feedback, be clear on what's expected, and you may need to get a little creative about it. Be clear and transparent about the work of the team. Make sure that you have established rules of the road, again, for communication, decision-making, how you're going to hold each other accountable. And I would advocate, again, for an emphasis on results over effort, outcome over effort. Listen more carefully. So this is a really big one, and I'll underscore this at the end. I think as a hybrid leader, you need to be able to clearly hear the signal from the noise, right? So filter the signal from the noise. You're going to be getting a lot of information coming at you from your hybrid employee via text or emails, company policy, the people in the office. It's coming at you from all directions as a hybrid leader. So I think being able to hone your listening skills and filter out the noise for the message, paying attention to the tone of the message and not just the words, is something I would advocate for getting particularly good at if you are going to be leading a hybrid team. And then last but not least, I would say coach regularly in a way that encourages self-reliance. coach, coach, coach. If people are working in a more independent environment, work with them in a way that encourages that independence with perhaps less direction and more coaching. Give them the opportunity to be self-reliant and seek the right path to their solution, whatever challenge or issue they're working on. And one of the best ways that you can do that is to be a leader coach. So keeping an eye on time, and we've got 2 more to get through. But I would love to just pause, and Kim, I know I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat. I know you are as well. Before we move into the topic of connection, I'd love to ask all of you, what's one way you've seen your team keep connection alive in a virtual or hybrid world? So if you wouldn't mind putting something in the chat, I'd love to see some of your ideas about how have you kept connection alive in that virtual world. Virtual retreats, the gifts, I love the gifts. Yes, Beth Ann, thank you for that. Virtual happy hours, they're not getting old for me, have to be honest with you. Oh,
I
Friday
agree.
topics, yeah, Friday topics, let's see. Photos
Yeah.
via group text, virtual bingo. Yeah, connecting before meetings. Some of you are stealing my thunder. Regular check-ins, virtual games. Yeah, and you know what? I won't read all of them. Keep them coming because I love the group contributions here, and maybe somebody will contribute something that another individual didn't think about. So yeah, keeping connection alive in a virtual, Melissa, I love yours, 15-minute touch points. So yeah, even if we don't get to everything in my in my webinar here, you are all surfacing some of the things that I was hoping we'd be able to share, right? Because creating connection is incredibly important. And so let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you can do as a hybrid leader, whether you see them in the 5 that I share or in what your colleagues are sharing. Let's talk about that. So demonstrate emotional intelligence. I talked about that eye contact and being aware of how you're coming across to others. It's a lot easier to read those signs when you are together in the office. And I think we've gotten better at that in the virtual environment, but continue to focus on, as a leader, being really aware of how you're coming across to others. You know, if you can't read their body language, ask, draw them out, and find out what is going on with them. Because if you can't read that in the hybrid room and you're not with them in person, you need to verbalize, or maybe ask them to verbalize what's going on with them. So express certainly emotional intelligence. Keep eye contact and engagement by having everyone use a computer. This is a new idea. I think it could be a little awkward and quirky. I'd be interested if some of you have used this before. So this is where everyone in the meeting room, even if you're all in the physical room together, use a computer so that if there are 3 people in the physical office and 3 people on the phone, everyone's on the computer and you're all focused the same way. I see Adam saying that he's used it and it works nicely. So yeah, so that's one thing that you can do. Continue to keep eye contact, have everyone use a computer so you're maintaining that virtual first or digital first perspective. Create connection by having those intentional check-ins. I mentioned the office hours. Some of you have indicated stand-up meetings. And when you do it, don't be like this guy. Don't be multitasking. Make sure that you're focused on the interaction that you have with your employees. When they're in the office, hopefully you're not grabbing your phone or clicking on a tab. But when you're working with a hybrid employee or a virtual employee, it can be a little more tempting. So make sure that you are keeping those check-ins, you're staying mindful and not multitasking, and you are thoughtful about keeping the consistency of those check-ins. Find opportunities for the team to connect on the personal side of things. Yeah, and Adam, thank you for saying you have to slow your thinking and remember virtual first. So you're underscoring my mindset element. So absolutely, you do need to stop, slow your thinking, and think virtual first. And then find opportunities to connect on the personal side of things. Maybe that's sharing a furry friend. Maybe that is the infamous pre-meeting weather chat. And I'm being a little humorous here, but you know, that chat that everyone has before the meeting starts. What's it like for you in California? How's the weather in New Jersey, right? That might seem a little silly, but that's some of the way that we create connection, whether it's weather chat or something else. So when you log into those meetings in a hybrid environment, log in right away. You don't want your hybrid team members missing out on that weather chat, because as humorous as it is part of connection. And so you want to keep that alive. Create those rituals and celebrate accomplishments. Maybe it's a Bob Ross painting party, or again, the virtual happy hour, celebrating personal and professional milestones. Keep those alive, and you can help to keep that connection alive regardless of where folks reside. Celebrate team accomplishments, personal accomplishments, and you can use technology. I chose not to bring a lot of technology into this webinar in the interest of time, but I think that that's a whole other avenue for leaders to explore. How can you use Teams? How can you use Slack to create connection? Hashtag parenting tips, hashtag epic fails. Start to create chats with your employees, as many of you have indicated you've done, to keep that connection alive and get creative about it. And then last but not least, drive results. How can you as a hybrid leader continue to do that? Set clear goals around what success looks like and provide feedback. I touched upon this a little bit in terms of the alignment as well. Make sure that you are giving feedback and asking for it. I want to emphasize that, and use the right modality for it, right? So chat might be the right way to tell somebody, or text message, that you're running late for a meeting. Maybe not the best place to provide constructive feedback. So be aware as you are communicating, not just about the message. I've mentioned the tone, but also the modality as well. And I said ask for feedback, so we'll keep moving. Keep those one-on-ones and create office hours. So again, super easy, I think, to just hit forward to the next week on that one-on-one, and not keep that regular cadence with your hybrid or virtual team member. Harder to not follow up with that person when they're staring you in the face in the office, but keep your one-on-ones and create office hours. Find ways to collaborate. Technology can help. There are a lot of different technology solutions that you can explore to continue to keep collaboration alive. And then last but not least, step up your meeting game. The way you run them matters. Let me get specific, just to give you a couple of ideas. Rotate who runs the meeting. This way you can keep the attention to some of your virtual attendees. Set an agenda so that the people in the office and those in a virtual scenario both know what to expect. Set some rules of the road around contribution, and be really tuned in as a leader, again, to who the loudest voices are and who is maybe not speaking up. And then one tool that I saw that I thought was just so smart, and I can't remember where I read it, is keep an eye on that mute button, right? How many times do you see in a meeting, at least I've seen, the mute goes on, the mute goes off? That's somebody trying to jump in and say something. And this stat really struck me when I thought about that tip of, as a leader, keep an eye on the mute button. Because in the global workforce survey research, they found out that 42% of workers have left a meeting without saying what was on their mind. And the same research showed that a staggering 98% of meetings will include at least one remote participant. So if you don't think that meetings matter and you don't need to step up your game, if my conversation isn't compelling, hopefully the stats will compel you. And again, really, I have only brushed lightly upon some issues of proximity bias and creating inclusivity in a hybrid environment. I think it bears a separate conversation and a deeper dive, but certainly consciously driving inclusive experiences and making sure all voices are heard wherever they are joining the meeting room from. So we're wrapping up, and we'll have an opportunity to take a couple of questions, but I want to end on just a few quick notes. If you remember nothing else from this discussion, remember that communication is the single most important tool that you have as a leader. And so communicating thoughtfully, being mindful of your tone, the modality that you use, the frequency of your communication, too much, too little, and making sure that your communication includes thoughtful listening and filtering for the message and the mood is the most important thing that you can do as a leader, whether you are in person, virtual, or hybrid. And then that key word, intentionality, right? Same skills that you've deployed as a good leader in the past with greater intentionality and certainly some nuance to it. So look, the road ahead will be bumpy. There are going to be days where, much like in this legal proceeding, you have a cat filter on your Zoom and you just can't get it off. Despite the fact that this gentleman showed up as a cat in his Zoom meeting, he assured the other attorneys he was in fact a human being and offered to go forward with the proceeding. But things are going to happen. It will be bumpy. You need to keep a sense of humor and you need to keep a lot of that growth mindset. Expect the bumps and be willing to certainly pivot. And yes, Annie, this was by far one of the funniest things I've seen on the internet in a while, but they persevered. And so will our leaders. So in summary, hybrid is here to stay for many, not all organizations. Leaders need to adapt. You need to adapt to what the hybrid environment will bring or has already brought. It's a shared responsibility. A lot of focus on leaders today. Certainly, I think we could run a similar webinar or have the same discussion around the individual and their role in creating a relationship, a hybrid scenario that works. Be thoughtful and intentional in your approach. Again, it's mindsets, as Adam also pointed out, right? That digital first, virtual first, growth mindset. And skill sets that you already have as a leader, I know it, in a new context. So I've loved chatting with all of you about this and really appreciate the activity in the chat. I know we only have a couple of minutes, Kim, but wondering if there is a question or two that you wanted to toss my way.
We did answer, and we have more questions coming in, but the time, I think because the topic is so hot, Leah, you did such a great job. It was such a great discussion. But I do, let me run by a couple questions from you, and if we don't answer them, we will be sure to send them in the follow-up an answer. Okay, so first, I'm just going to try and work in order, and I apologize if you already answered it through the presentation, but this, sorry. Helen asked, as a leadership coach, she noticed that many people are trying hard to satisfy the diverse needs of their team members with a hybrid working, but often at a cost for themselves. And she wants to know, what are your thoughts on how leaders can get the right balance?
Yeah, so I think that that's a great question, right? Because that question of digital fatigue and wellness and well-being is real for leaders. You know, somebody that I was talking to recently used a metaphor of, leaders have really been running this marathon the past 18 months, 2 years. And it's like they can see the finish line in the distance. And just when they got there, somebody said, oh no, the finish line is actually another 10 miles down the road. So that sense of fatigue, and we survived this virtual scenario, we're done. You're not done, right? Because it's something new now, it's hybrid. And so that fatigue is real. And I think as a leader, being mindful of your own wellness and well-being and taking an inventory of that, right? What do you need to do to make sure that you are staying healthy and strong for the people that need you, but that you're also being transparent about it. I don't think that leaders do themselves any favors if they don't, again, share their own lived experience and acknowledge, what they're struggling with from a fatigue standpoint or a work from home standpoint. So I would say that fatigue is very real. And I think the same way that you would advocate for your people to be mindful of wellness and talk through what do you need in order to get better balance or to address your own sense of well-being, you need to reflect on that. And I think you need to be more transparent in sharing that with your people.
Great.
Kim, another question, or should I?
Yeah, no.
Chat here? Okay.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can now, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No
So I
worries.
think you might have covered this on the last question, but so going from a less observation to and surveillance to focusing on results, how can you manage the time the employees spend to get those results? This can cause pressure to perform and employees working.
Yeah, so can you repeat the question, Kim? You broke up a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, it's
You're bet-
it's
you're
based.
better.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can.
Sorry, I'm sorry. How do you manage the employees' times to get results without having them work weekends and nights and hence causing more stress and fatigue and burned out? How do you deal with that as a
Yeah, yeah, again, I know I don't want to sound too much like a broken record, but I think you have to have a conversation with that employee about what's going on, right? And is there some kind of support that they need from you? Why are they spending that extra time? Is there some adjustment to their workload that they need? Is there technology that might support them in being more efficient? So what's going on for them, and having a transparent conversation about what they might need, I would say, is the first step. And then there's some other, I think, creative ways that leaders have addressed that. Some folks put it in the chat. Some organizations are, no meeting Mondays or no meeting Fridays, to give folks the opportunity to get their work done without the distraction of needing to be on calls. Or maybe even no meeting Fridays and summer afternoons, where the prevailing approach is, get your work done in the morning and then give you a little bit more time and breathing room to spend that afternoon the way that you need to maybe reset and recalibrate as a human being. So I don't think there's a one size fits all approach. I think there's some creative solutions that organizations have been putting in place to deal with that digital fatigue. But I think you really need to understand what's going on for that individual that's causing them to need to, work more than maybe you feel they should or they feel they should to get the outcome or the results that they need. So that's what I would say, Kim.
Okay, Leah, one last question before we close up, and this is a good one. What if my team member refuses to follow the company policy on hybrid work?
Oh, that is a really good question. So one of the things that I didn't emphasize is the turnover tsunami, and how a lot of people are voting with their feet if they don't like the response that they're hearing to the hybrid policy that their organization is putting in place. And in fact, the Apple employees pointed that out in their letter. So it is a very real fact that some employees will choose other quote unquote greener pastures if they don't feel as though what they need can be met. Having said that, I think that it's important to understand from your organization, how hard and fast is that policy? Do you exist in an organization where you need to follow that letter of the law? Or is your organization saying, here is our policy, generally speaking, but we're leaving it up to you, leader, to implement it at the local level? And so I think as a leader, if that employee is refusing, you need to understand a little bit the expectations of your organization. Is it hard and fast, or is there some flexibility? And then can you engage with that employee about what really is going on for them? What do they need? Because again, a lot of times it's less about 2 days, 3 days than it is about wanting flexibility. What is behind their need for flexibility, and can you meet that need for flexibility in some different way, in a way that won't result in a stalemate? So I would say, as a leader, understand, is your policy hard and fast, or do you have some opportunity to put guardrails in place at the local level as you implement that policy? And then engage in a conversation with your employee about what it is they need. What's the flexibility that they're looking for? So it's less of a conversation around 2 days, 3 days, and you're really getting to the why or the root of their request for or refusal to abide by the policy.
This webinar is brought to you by GP Strategies. Together we can create a world where business excellence makes possibilities achievable. You can access more webinars or download additional resources at gpstrategies.com/resource-library.